Welcome, new and old friends. I just have a couple things to say, and then the stories will begin. Before you drift off into the dream realm, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. If you'd like to find out about my social links, my website, how to help the channel, check the description box. Now turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's time to dream. A Young Girl's Plea for Her Beloved Pet by I Don't Know a Name 101. Hello, Chloe. I really had the time of my life with you. You truly made my dreams come true and proved no one is a better friend than you. I hope you had just as much fun as I did because, unfortunately, this fun that has been granted to us has an end and its consequences. Immediately when you receive this letter, follow all the instructions carefully if you want a chance of meeting me again. 1. I made an underground bunker for us deep within the forest near the tree house. So deep and obscure that no one would suspect anything. A bit dramatic, I know, but who are we to underestimate the power of friendship? Leave promptly. The directions are on this slip. Please do not leave any trace whatsoever suggesting you've been here. 2. Do not be seen. People don't know what I know. They don't see what I see. Bad things could happen, and I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want you to be taken away from me, not without saying goodbye. 3. However, in the event you happen to be around people, they sweet talk, try to touch or feed, or in any way try to get closer to them, politely decline their advances and back away as quickly as you can. Do not let them get distressed, upset, or annoyed. It will always make things worse. 4. My family, beware of their behavior towards you and this special treatment. Do not be swayed. They don't know any better and are trying to repair you as if you were near the end of your life as you were before. This goes without saying that that's not the case. If you don't want to live on as you are, do your best not to encounter them and avoid them at all costs. All this is explained that, in the eyes of everyone else, you're still a cat, a missing cat that needs to be put down. Unfortunately, I can't make the decision, but I really want you to be my human friend forever. Whether you want any of this or not, I will never truly know. Choose not to follow this letter, and we won't see each other again, not like this. I'm sorry we didn't know any of this earlier. It's my fault and my selfishness. I would never have wished it to happen this way. I hope one day, whether you decide you can forgive me, I just want to have fun one last time. You were always more than a pet to me, and I couldn't let it go. Maybe after this, I can make peace. Lots of love, Maya. Your childhood instincts are correct. The murderer cannot, in fact, get you as long as you're completely covered by your blanket. That's okay. I'll wait. I think I might be alone by I Am Furious. I am alone right now. I don't mean that it's just me in the apartment. I mean that there's no one else in the world. I don't know what happened, but 3 days ago I found the sky had gone black and there was no one else alive. Except for the good old internet and news and the phone calls I've sent my parents and coworkers. Let me start on Saturday at 10 p.m. So as part of my onboarding for the new company, I have to do a week or two of each of their product tours. I've already done my tour 3, which is really early in the morning, and tour 2 is default day shift. Tour 1 is dinner to early morning, which is why I'm getting up so early on a Sunday. Something about the official start of the next day being 10 p.m. yesterday or something. I got up at 9 p.m. and the first thing I noticed was just how dark it was outside. Like, darker than it would have been just that late at night. I didn't really think too much about it at the time because I was still tired from trying to adjust to the night shift. I got ready for the day like normal and started my drive to work. I noticed there wasn't much traffic on the highway as I drove to work, which again, I didn't really think anything of because it was late and I was still a little out of it. I didn't even realize anything was really wrong when I got to work. I didn't expect there to be anyone in the office section of the warehouse where I work. I am an operational industrial engineer, so I'm an admin. I go to my workstation, boot it up, check my emails, and begin procrastinating away the next few hours of being the only one in the office. It was around midnight that I thought I'd go to do a walk around the warehouse floor and see what Tour 1 actually looked like. The thing is, there was no one there. This was weird because I was told we pretty much run 24/7 even on holidays. I walked the whole floor and found evidence of activity, like a pallet jack abandoned in the middle of the aisle, a few carts ready to move on to the trucks, but no people. After something like a half an hour trying to figure out where everyone was, I decided that maybe they lied about the holiday part and this Monday was actually one of those random ones that we forgot existed. I laughed and head home, quietly thankful for the extra day to try and acclimatize to the night shift. I was a bit more awake driving home, so I noticed the complete absence of traffic so late at night. I kind of expected there to be someone out at this time, but again, it was late. I then rationalized that it was a holiday, so of course no one would be out. It was sheer blackness that got me, though. It was dark, the only illumination coming from my headlights and the street lamps. I couldn't see the moon or any stars, just a black as black sky. I guess it was just cloudy and put it out of my mind. When I got home, I immediately went online because I have no life and found absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. I was getting emails like normal. People had posting videos on social media like normal. I even found a few YouTube videos that were posted an hour ago and stuff like that. Things looked normal online. And then it got to be 8 in the morning and I looked outside. It was still black as black outside. It spooked me at first, but then I remembered that it was cloudy outside. Just to be sure, I checked the weather online. The weather said it was clear skies until Friday. I had to stare at that for a bit. Eventually, I had decided that the weather auto location was broken and it thought I was in the next city or something. There was no way you miss clouds like that. It did kind of creep me out how it was constantly dark outside. But it wasn't until the next day that I started to get suspicious. So, 9 at night, it's pitch black out. Get ready, drive to work. As I stand in the parking lot, I realized suddenly that it was warm. I get that nights can be warm sometimes, but this warmth it didn't feel right to me. I shrugged it off as some sort of weather effect. I got into work, checked emails, everything looked normal. Except for the fact that I see emails that suggest that everyone came into work yesterday. I was confused, to say the least, and then I went out to walk the floor. It was just like last night, exactly like last night. Stuff was still in the dock, waiting to be shipped. A pallet jack was in the middle of an aisle. I walked the floor for an hour, trying to rationalize it until I just decided that somehow the fact that it was still officially Monday meant that it was still a holiday, even if the schedule was weird. My mind ignored the emails telling me that today was not a holiday and assumed that everyone would be normal tomorrow. It was still pitch black out, and there was still no cars on the road. But there were new YouTube videos, there were new emails in my inbox, there were new posts on Reddit and Twitter. Hell, there was a full VOD on Twitch that had clearly been recorded yesterday. But it was still dark when the sun should have been up. My parents live only a few hours away, so if there was severe weather, then my mother would have called me about it, right? I mean, she would have seen it when she drives into work, so I called my parents and asked about the weather. My parents, of course, said that everything was just fine and got really confused when I mentioned the darkness. They rationalized it was just a storm front that they'll be dealing with later this week, and I just agreed with them because it makes sense. It was just a storm front sitting over the city. It was just a holiday. No one drives this late at night. Everything was fine. Everything was normal. And then I went back to work. Now, at this point, pallet jack, yada yada. It suddenly dawned on me that maybe we don't have a night shift. This is just a hazing thing done to the new guy. They say, go to the night shift for a week, and laugh as you walk an empty floor. It makes perfect sense, and the whole making the floor look the same. Clearly, someone was pushing it a little. I just go home for the rest of the week, screw them. They wanted to effectively give me the week off, and I was going to take it off. It'd be a funny story, and I come in on Monday at the normal time, and we all laugh. There was no one on the road when I went home. It wasn't until dinner for my off-scheduled ass that I realized just how wrong things were. I'd run out of food and decided to go to Havy. The one just down the road was open from 6 in the morning till 11 at night, and it was almost 7 for me. They'd be open. So I go out, get in my car. It was still dark, still off-putting, but I didn't really care at this point. I noticed just how empty the street was, though. My normal shift had me heading to work at this time, and there was a bit of traffic, but there was absolutely nothing. No one was even in Havy's parking lot. No one was in the store. Just my car out there and me inside, walking down the rows of mildly overpriced food items alone. It was weird, and I started to get this feeling that I was being watched whenever I walked by the windows. I pretty much overloaded my cart with stuff and ran to the checkout. Of course, no one was manning anything, but there was a self-checkout. I actually went through and paid for everything I had in my cart before heading to the door. When I got outside, it was like the darkness was thicker, warmer somehow. There was obviously no one out there, but I don't know. I shoved everything into my car and drove off, mostly respecting the speed limits. I was weirded out. I knew something was wrong, but I don't know. I just don't know. Thankfully, there's a garage at my apartment, so I could take my groceries without feeling being watched. But everything looked fine online. I had an idea, though. I could call my mom. My mom would drive up after work. She buzzed in at the front gate. She come to my apartment door and knock. She proved that I wasn't crazy. She proved that it was just foggy and there were clouds and that somehow just happened to miss everyone at the grocery store. So I called my mom. She could tell from the way I was acting that something was really wrong and that she would be driving up immediately. The hour and a half it took for her to get here was the longest in my life. All throughout it, I would peek outside and feel wrong, alone, watched, and then I'd get a buzz on my phone. Apartment front door. I let my mom into the building and wait, and then she calls me. My mom was in my apartment, but I couldn't see her. She said that she knocked and eventually tried the handle. I guess it happened that my door was unlocked, except for the fact that my door was locked. She was looking around, my computer was on, apparently, my lights were on, but I wasn't there. My first reaction is that she clearly must have gone to the wrong apartment. I didn't hear knocking because the walls were built right. We both laughed and I go outside to make sure she sees me. She says that I'm not in the hall. I say that's impossible. I FaceTime her and show her the hall that I'm clearly in. She FaceTimes me and shows me the hall that I'm clearly not in. I don't get it. I walk my mom through my apartment with FaceTime and we find out that somehow I haven't been there for 3 days. My fridge is like it was from Saturday. My computer is on and has Reddit open. I make sure she's in my room when I open a YouTube video, but she says she doesn't see anything. She believes me when I say I'm scared. She believes me when I open the blinds and show her the darkness outside. She asks me what that thing in the fog is. What thing in the fog? There is something out there. There is something in the darkness and it is watching me. My mom says that she'll stay on the line and keep me company while I barricade my apartment. Eventually though, she needs to leave. I promise to text her every hour that I'm okay. I actually just texted her right now. Funny that. That thing is out there, and somehow it feels like the darkness is pushing in slightly through the windows. I don't know what to do. I'm debating sleeping in the bathroom just to have an extra door between me and it. I'll update you if anything else happens. Update. Something is in my apartment. I can hear it outside my bedroom door. There isn't a lock on it since this is a 1-bedroom, so I just have a chair propped up against it to keep it shut. Update. It started knocking. Update. It stopped knocking. Update. I realize I have a window. Update. I am here. I knew that my gambling debts were now insurmountable, so with deep regrets, I wrote a suicide note and loaded my pistol. My wife's insurance payout should net me just enough to buy into a game where I can win it all back. And I'm betting that the cops won't be able to prove it was me. Exploring an Abandoned Warehouse by Stan Cooper 22. Sorry if this is a long post, but I need to share this with someone. There is this abandoned warehouse in the middle of my city. Not in the middle, but in the busy part of the city. The reason no one has done anything about it is because the warehouse used to be owned by a petroleum company. They used it to store oil before the city expanded. Now there's a flyover right over it, and the property is owned by the city and the Railway Commission because of the rail line that runs next to it. Anyway, it's just a building that used to be part of a massive complex of warehouses, silos, and a factory. Now, this one building remains. A friend and I like to explore abandoned places, mainly for the experience and to imagine what it would have been like when the place was active and functioning. So we were looking for places to explore, and I had known about this location. It is quite close to where we live. So I suggested if we could explore the warehouse. My friend jumped at the chance and we set a date, Saturday morning. We decided to go early in the morning because that area is known for shady things and the nights weren't safe. It also gets busy during the midday. Anywho, we went around 7 a.m., walked over there since it's not too far. When we reached the place, it was messy. Garbage piled up in the corner and the compound wall tagged with graffiti. We had to find a way in. As we walked around, we discovered that there was no way in from the street. It was just a wall all the way down. We had to get in from the tracks. So we walked around and entered the railway tracks. From the tracks, you could see the flyover that runs over it and an apartment next to the warehouse. This place is like in the middle of all the action, yet it is in its own bubble, lost to time. On the other side of the tracks is army and railway property. We eventually found a break in the wall that allowed us to enter the place. We had to hop over it, and there was an old broken freezer just lying on the other side. So people have come in here before. When we stepped in, I kid you not, I felt this overwhelming sense of dread. Yeah, it sounds cliche as hell, but I just felt something was off. I told my friend this, and she just shrugged it off, like it was no big deal. She basically said it was probably because we were trespassing and we could get caught. Inside, there was a lot of overgrown poppy plants and wild weeds just growing out of the cement. We had to trek through this brief bit of foliage, and once we did, we stepped into a compound. The compound was big, but I couldn't sense the size of it because of a good amount was being covered in overgrown wild foliage. But we could see the warehouse building rising over it in an imposing and dilapidated form. My friend was excited to see this. She pulled out her phone and took some pictures. I looked around and the feeling was just getting worse. Then we walked farther in, and that's when I saw it. On the ground, bones, like animal bones. It was a whole field of bones just strewed around on the ground. I freaked. I'm a guy who does not believe in superstition, but I also do think curses and black magic and the supernatural is a possibility. So when I saw a literal compound full of bones, like skulls, femurs, teeth, and a whole animal skeleton compounded with that feeling of intense dread and doom, a feeling that I get when someone close to me is about to die, I want to get out of there. I told my friend that we need to leave. She still wanted to explore. She was walking all over the bones and kicking them around. I was watching this and getting more scared. I asked her why there would be a whole bunch of bones here. She said she didn't know and didn't really care. Now, she doesn't believe in anything supernatural. Ghosts don't exist in her mind, and curses and black magic, or just psychological sleight of hand. To be honest, I kind of think the same way, but I also don't dismiss the idea that someone can get cursed, or a place can be cursed. So for her, this is just fun. For me, terrifying. I was carefully watching my step, trying my best to avoid the bones. She was just trampling all over them. I didn't want to explore further, and she did. I somehow convinced her that we needed to leave, and she finally conceded, realizing I was actually scared for my life. After we left and on the way back, I realized that feeling had not gone. I told her this. She said I was probably paranoid. Funny thing, I never mentioned this earlier because I personally think it's a coincidence, but there's always that nagging feeling at the back of my mind that it's not. Now, for as long as I can remember, on some level I've had an ability to sense when someone is about to die. Like, they can be healthy, young, old, or sick. But if they are about to die, I can sense it. Many times even before they realize. Like, it only comes when I'm close to the person physically or interacting with them. But I have to be around or in some kind of contact with them. Basically, when I'm with them, I can't get the thought of death out of my head. That was the feeling I was getting when I was with her after we left. Mind you, I never got that feeling before we entered the place. No, I instantly got it after we left. I told her this, like I just told her I thought we might be cursed and that one of us is going to die. She, as usual, made a joke out of it and then semi-seriously said that I wasn't invited to her funeral if she died. But I told her that I was not going back there. She agreed and we went back home. Cut to a few days later. We had plans to watch a movie when she suddenly canceled on me because she fell sick. That feeling had not gone. In fact, it came back stronger. She jokingly mentioned it was the curse. I just laughed, but at the back of my mind, I was wondering if it actually was. Then a few days after that, I find out she had been admitted in the hospital. The condition was getting worse. The rest I found out from her parents because she had slipped into a coma shortly after that. The doctors were trying everything, and they couldn't figure out why she wasn't recovering. Then one night, I was just sitting on my computer watching videos when I got the feeling again, stronger than ever this time. Like stronger than I had ever gotten before. Funny thing, no one was around me, and I wasn't talking to anyone either. The only thought I had was someone is going to die, and I couldn't focus on what I was doing, just the thought of death. I thought I was going to die, and the feeling got worse and worse. I tried to fight the feeling and shake it off, but it wouldn't go. Then suddenly it stopped, and all I could feel was sadness. I went to sleep. The next morning, I find out from my parents that my friend had passed away last night in the hospital. I have never been in that warehouse again. Being paranoid about losing sight of my son while in crowded places, I make sure to firmly hold on to the hand of my son while walking through the amusement park. Walking out of the crowded attraction, still holding on to his hand tightly, I then turn around and froze in horror when I realized that the hand I was holding on to was not my child's. Rules for Time Traveling by Unidentified User 202. Time traveling is a very delicate matter. One screw-up can mean the end of our continuum. This is why we adhere to a specific set of rules that ensure that time traveling stays safe. Rule 1. This rule is specific to you and more of a reminder that on your birthday, you must go back in time to 2090 to have intercourse with a woman with blonde hair walking into our hotel room. I don't care how you make it happen, just make sure it does. Rule 2. I think this is self-explanatory, but do not kill your grandfather. The universe will end if you do. Rule 3. We make sure that historic events such as the fall of the Soviet Union and the start of the Great Depression happen exactly as it does in our textbooks. You will be stationed at one of these important historical events to make sure everything goes normally. Think of it like a Groundhog Day, unless you see something that was not there before, like an extra animal or a building that is completely different than the one in our logs. It's probably just a tiny time glitch. These don't really need to be worried about. If it is a person, however, restrain them immediately. Go back in time as many times as you need to do so. Otherwise, do not interfere. Do not do so much as crush a fucking bug. You'll be given an invisible cloak and food and water module, so there is no need to eat or drink. Rule 4. There is only one event that we have made sure deliberately does not happen the way it was meant to, and that is J.F. Kennedy's continued reign as president. The higher-ups didn't give me any other details other than you need to make sure that he says the words, "No, they sure can't," before you assassinate him. Rule 5. Do not travel beyond the year 9999. Just don't. Anyway, yeah, that's it. Stay safe out there, new guy. I always laughed inside at the hypothetical scenario of time travelers saying World War I or World War II in response to a question asked by a World War I soldier. That wasn't until I met a time traveler asking if World War III had started yet. My wife and I answer the phone, and now our past has come back to haunt us. By Ever Black Death Mask. We as a species are a creature of lingering regrets. We constantly think of things that we didn't do, the opportunities we missed out on, the alternatives to the choices we have made, and the haunting question of what if? I am no different, and that is what brings me here to share my experience today. I have had a what-if question that has persisted in my head like a broken record. It has lingered in the darkest recess of my mind like a cockroach and has continued to fester there to the present day. What if we had come forward with the truth? The answer to this question is not for the faint of heart. What I'm about to describe to you is just as much of a detailed recollection of the events as it is a confession. What you choose to believe is entirely up to all of you, but I need the truth to be out there in order to repent. This all started a few months ago when I began communicating with the dead. Now, this grave endeavor wasn't in vain, mind you. The main reason I entertained this idea and participated was because I was desperate. You see, I have lost a lot of people in my life, people I wish I could see again and communicate with that were no longer here. What I desired most was closure with my loved ones and friends, and death had taken them from me. That was until Jan and I were cleaning our basement out one day. We were moving some miscellaneous junk strewed about the basement to the garage for donation or to the trash. It was nothing more than a typical cleaning project that neither one of us wanted to do, but it had to be done. As I was cleaning out a particular corner of the basement, I stumbled upon a box containing a Ouija board. Now, I didn't remember ever purchasing or acquiring a Ouija board, and I know for certain Jane wouldn't have it either. She was not a fan of creepy things in the slightest. How it ended up there was a complete mystery. My immediate thought was to just throw it away. There was no reason for us to have it. It's not that I didn't believe in the paranormal or anything. I had an experience years ago that made me a believer. I just didn't think it was an item that should continue to be in our household. That is when a thought crossed my mind, one that I should never begin to entertain the idea of. What if I could speak with those people I never got a chance to speak with again? This was an idea that intrigued me at the time. Reconnecting with people that were once in my life and knowing that there was a life beyond death provided a strange comfort to me. I can't explain it, but in that moment, I felt like I was compelled to use the board once I found it. After pondering things over for a moment longer, I had made my decision. In hindsight, I should not have made a decision of such magnitude so recklessly, but regardless, my mind was made up. I placed the Ouija board back where I found it, pretending that I hadn't seen it, and proceeded to go about my day acting as if I hadn't seen anything. Tomorrow, when I get home from work, while my wife was still working, I would use the Ouija board. And that is exactly what I did. From that day forward, for months, I spent that 2-hour time period before Jane got home from work downstairs in the basement, communicating with the deceased. My usage of the Ouija board granted me the ability to be able to talk to my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, and anyone else I so desired to talk to. We discussed the afterlife, my life, and what I never got into when they were here on this soil. It was a relief unlike any other, and I was grateful to be able to break the barrier between the living and the dead to talk to my loved ones. It began so innocently with them. All I had ever intended was to talk to them and get some closure, but it became an addiction. I couldn't stop using the Ouija board. Over time, I had started inviting random spirits to conduct a conversation with me. It became therapeutic for me when I would ask these spirits questions and learn about them in addition to the unknown and beyond. Despite my morbid fixation on conversating with the dead, I never let anything get out of hand. My habit was always restricted to that 2-hour window I had, and I was always going to be in control of the situation. Yesterday, though, that all changed. I was going about things like I normally did with the Ouija board, the candles that circled me illuminating the basement as I called out, "Are there any spirits here that want to communicate at this time?" My words echoed throughout the basement as I patiently awaited a response from beyond the grave. Some time had passed before the planchette I had my hands placed over began to shake. Slowly it moved over to the words, yes. I nodded my head and inquired, "Who am I speaking to?" Once more, the planchette began to move and glide over the letters G, R, A, C, and E. I felt myself grow cold as if I had stepped into a meat locker. My eyes widened in horror. That name. Grace, why are you communicating with me? My words hung in the air like a fog as I anxiously waited for the spirit to answer. I could feel my heart pulsating very fast, and I did my best to take deep breaths to slow the frantic pace. A moment later, the planchette moved to a series of letters that spelled out the word return. Return? What do you mean by this? I inquired, my eyes darting around in the darkness surrounding the candles I had lit. Silence overcast the basement, and nothing was heard besides the thunderous thumping of my heart. I had never experienced anything like this in the months I had used the Ouija board. I had never felt such ominous and dark energy that contaminated the room like a plague. I glanced down at the planchette, wondering if there was even going to be a response, when a gust of wind snuffed out the candles. I blindly looked around, the darkness enveloping my vision as I felt the perspiration form on my forehead from fright. It felt like I was being watched, but by who, I could not tell. It was a feeling that lurked as I felt an icy, cold hand grip my shoulder. I stood still as a statue, rooted to the spot in horror, as a voice whispered a command into my ear. Run! That's when my adrenaline kicked in and I bolted up the stairs. I closed the basement door behind me and went up to Jane and I's room to hide and to calm down. I didn't move from my place in our bedroom until Jane had come home from work. I didn't dare tell her what had occurred. The last thing I wanted for her to feel was unsafe and scared in the comfort of our home. I collected myself and went downstairs to greet her and resumed the evening like it was any other. When it was time to call it night, I waited for her to go upstairs before going back down and hiding the Ouija board. I would take care of its disposal in the morning while Jane still slept. In the meantime, however, I was going to catch some much-needed rest and put this whole bizarre fixation of mine behind me. I promised myself from that moment onward that I would never communicate with the dead ever again. My weird addiction to the Ouija board had to end for the sake of my sanity and well-being. The room was painfully quiet in the early hours of the morning, almost as if time itself had stopped entirely. Darkness cloaked the room like a massive blanket as I lay next to Jane. A faint light creeped in through the window, allowing for light visibility of various pieces of furniture in the bedroom. My eyes scanned the room for a moment for any anomalies before resting my gaze upon her. She was still sound asleep, her breathing rhythmic as she continued to dream in peace. Her arms were wrapped around me lightly, like vines on a tree trunk. I slowly wiggled free from her grasp and rolled onto my side. I was still in a dazed state, my eyelids fighting a losing battle to stay open as I became self-aware of my heart being against my rib cage. It thudded rapidly, like it had been engulfed in a nightmare. I couldn't remember if I had been dreaming or not, but it must not have been important if I couldn't remember, right? That's what I told myself as I closed my eyes and wrapped myself back into the sheets like a cocoon. I lay still for a while, waiting for sleep to overtake my consciousness. When it seemed as though I was about to doze off, my cell phone that was on my nightside table lit up like a Christmas tree and began to ring. The vibration of the device buzzing on the table grated my eardrums as I let out a groan of frustration. I sluggishly reached out and silenced the phone without even acknowledging who it was. I turned to my wife to see if she had stirred at all, but thankfully, to my delight, she had not been ripped from her slumber. I breathed a sigh of relief as I looked at the time, 3:03 a.m. "Give me a break," I mumbled irritatedly to myself as I turned back over, hoping to get some sleep. The idea of having to go to work on just a couple hours of sleep was not a pleasant thought. The last thing I wanted to do was daydream about dreaming. I closed my eyes and tried my best to silence my thoughts, but not even a moment after I had nestled into the warm embrace of the sheets, the phone rang again. My eyes shot open and I lunged out into the void of darkness to silence the phone. Good God, can I just get some rest? I buried my head under my blanket and face planted into the pillow, not wanting to think, see, or hear anything until 6 a.m. sharp when I absolutely had to be awake. The sound of my phone going off seconds after my face connected with the pillow indicated that someone was still trying to get in touch with me. I begrudgingly lifted my face from the pillow and squinted to look at my phone, which shone like a beacon of light on the bedside table. I exhaled angrily as I yanked the phone from its place on the table and stared down at the screen. My heart immediately sunk as I read the name of the person who was vehemently blowing up my phone. Grace. It was the same name that was spelt on the Ouija board earlier. I was confused. How was a spirit contacting me outside of the board? Was this a spirit that I thought it was? I chalked it up to all being a strange coincidence and put that dreadful thought to rest. I hit decline on the phone, and not even a second after I did, the phone began to ring again. This person doesn't give up, I thought as I pressed the decline call. The phone lit up and hummed violently as Grace continued to call again and again. I promptly kept declining the calls as they came through, and I was able to eventually block the person, resulting in a blissful silence falling upon the room. I gently placed the phone back down, and I was about to lay back down when I noticed Jane sitting up, looking at me in pure confusion. In the midst of all the chaos, I neglected the fact that the constant noise of my phone and I would have woken her. "What's going on?" she asked as a yawn escaped her lips. "Nothing, Jane. It was just some stupid scam caller or something. I took care of it," I reassured as I returned to my place beside her in the comfort of our bed. As soon as she and I began to get comfortable, that familiar humming sound filled the air, indicating that my phone was going off. "Apparently you didn't," she quipped as I snatched the phone from its resting place and messed with its settings. I was perplexed. I had blocked this person, so how was the same number calling? I decided to take the matters a step further and turned my phone off. I held the power button on my phone and watched the brand logo light up on the screen before dimming and blacking out completely. There, now I did. I breathed a sigh of relief as I returned to Jane's side and gave a light smile. That was way more complicated than it needed to be. We shared a laugh as we both laid on our backs and snuggled together under the sheets. I noticed. Seemed like you got a stalker. She teased as she wrapped her arms around my torso and placed her head on my chest. Who wants to stalk someone like me, though? I don't know. You tell me. She raised her head to look at me in the face and raised a slight brow jokingly. In that moment, I wanted to tell her the person's name, but decided it was better to withhold the information. There was no need to bother her with something as small as a name in the grand scheme of things. Before I could give a reply to her question, though, my phone rang yet again. This time, Jane and I both sat straight up in bed, immediately alarmed at what we were hearing. You turned that off, right? She asked with a concerned tone, her face peering over at my bedside table. Yeah, I turned the phone off. Did you not see me turn the phone off? I felt like my arms weighed 1,000 tons and my fingers shook as I took the phone and brought it to my face. I stood there and just stared at the bright lit screen, the name Grace striking fear into my heart. Grace? Who is this Grace and why is she calling you? It's 3 a.m, Jane said, clearly agitated and suspicious of the fact that another woman was calling me in the early hours of the morning. I don't know, but I'm going to answer and figure out what the meaning of this is. I pressed accept on the phone call and brought it up to my ear. Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but... I was interrupted by a burst of static that sounded like a radio trying to find a proper frequency. Hello? Is anybody there? I asked as I glanced over my shoulder at Jane, who appeared to be a nervous wreck. She looked how I felt internally, but I needed to be strong for her. I didn't want to look scared, but it was hard not to be. The whole thing was certainly strange. Put it on speaker. Her voice trembled with a worried tone. I nodded my head and pulled the phone away from my ear. I pressed the speaker button and we both listened with racing hearts as the static continued to blare. The noise persisted for a while before a faint voice crept through. Hello? The voice was weak, but there was no mistaking it. Someone was on the line. Yes, hello, who is this? How did you get my number? The questions poured out of me at a rapid-fire pace as I was trying to rationalize the scenario we found ourselves in. There was no response to anything I asked, and instead we were left to listen to the static, deafening sound from the speaker. The moments we spent waiting for a response seemed to drag on in dog ears, but eventually the voice returned, this time much clearer. This is Grace. I felt my blood turn to ice, every word piercing my skin like a haunting knife as I looked over at Jane, who shared the same horrific expression as myself. I felt my grip loosen on the phone as the words seemingly spun around me. This couldn't be real. None of this is real. Leave us alone. Jane's voice broke the silence between the two of us. She seized the phone from what little grasp I still had and tried to decline the call. No matter how many times she attempted to hang up, though, the call would not end. If anything, the static sound would get louder and louder, forcing Jane and I to cover our ears. As quickly as the stag noise raised itself to ear-piercing decibels, it stopped. Jane and I were afraid to breathe as we listened to the phone for any signs of life besides our own. I could feel my limbs trembling from the fear and the adrenaline. I was afraid to move in any capacity. I clutched my eyes shut and prayed for this to end. I could feel Jane's face hovering above my shoulder, and I could hear her trying to stifle cries of terror. The silence on the other side of the line was somehow more deafening than the static coming through just moments ago. It was not to last, however, as the voice returned and spoke clear as day from the other side of the line. "I'm here," the voice stated in an aggressive rasp before the phone call suddenly ended and the screen went black. Jane and I sat in the darkness, paralyzed by our own fear. We weren't sure what to make of what had just happened. It was like a piece of fiction had just come to life. There was nothing fictitious about this, however. This was the gravity of the situation coming crashing down upon us. There was a reason why that name had sounded so familiar earlier downstairs with the Ouija board. The voice on the phone all but confirmed our suspicions. She and I locked eyes in horror, and I felt myself shiver at the revelation. The spirit from the Ouija board and the voice on the phone were the same entity. It was Grace, our daughter we had killed 10 years ago. When the devil offered me a guaranteed lottery win in exchange for 1 year off the lifespan of every human on Earth, I accepted without a second thought. Waking up the next day to discover 80% of the population had mysteriously died overnight, I began to question if I had made the right decision. And now the stories have come to an end. If you're still awake, well, I hope you fall asleep shortly. And the sounds that you hear in the background are going to take center stage for no more than 30 minutes to help you fall asleep or stay asleep. But if you are awake and want to hear more stories, I do have playlists for that as well. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.